I'm Allan Davidson, and we're here at SystAIn3r. I have two guests to discuss consciousness, the theory and practice. Let me introduce them. That's Mahault Albarracin and Moensch Micha. And let's turn to our conversation. So just give me very briefly a little bit of information about how you became interested in what you're doing and you know, where your expertise lies and why do you feel it's important?
So I started in social sciences, and my main issue was that I couldn't make predictions. I could make descriptions, very good ones, very meaningful ones, but I could never use this and look to the future, really. It was mostly guesses, and even those guesses, oftentimes you didn't expect they would go very far. And so I found that the formalisms that were given to us by mathematics, physics, biology, had a very nice bridge through the specific approach that I'm using towards the social sciences. And so we're using the theoretical frameworks of social sciences to now be able to explain complex social phenomena, but also be able to predict them. And this is how I ended up in phenomenology and consciousness science. And it's important because, well, for one thing, we need to understand how to potentially replicate that, but also it helps us understand the mechanisms of who we are and how we may be able to go deeper in sometimes fixing some of the problems we encounter.
That's amazing. That's so cool how you explain it in from a complete different perspective. And I love it. I was born genetically into monasticism, let's say. I had a lot of monastics and priests and even a bishop in my family, so it's in my DNA, but it was my passion for observing people since I'm a little boy and always asking, why are they doing this? Don't they know that this is wrong? How they communicate with each other, how they talk to each other, how they behave, how they relate to each other. And as a little kid, I knew what it takes, but I was not able to do it. So the way out was basically the way in. And I had to go in to figure out how to bring out what people are for, why people are here. Basically what you say, but from a complete different aspiration. I love that. We are the right team here, you know?
No, but it does feel like you wanted to understand the mechanisms.
And I suffered a lot. Yeah, I suffered a lot, and then I see that it's also mutual. A thirst for understanding.
That's pretty cool. I have to agree enthusiastically. So let's start with you, Micha, because you've given this a lot of thought with a lot of historical perspective because of traditions. What is consciousness? Does it matter? And why does it benefit humans? How?
Of course it matters. Like mind matters. That's what I always say. Consciousness matters. Consciousness to me is the canvas, you know, we paint our lives on, is the frame we move in. Consciousness is our environment. We are bathing and basking. Our lives are built into consciousness. So, and it matters because we can also, that's my take on it, we can also influence it by our behavior because we are part of it. So it helps humans, first of all, to express themselves, to move around and to build and design our lives, our world, and build our future.
I think I agree. It doesn't matter where you come from it. Consciousness, according to many scientists, is the only thing you have because it's the only thing which allows you to measure what is out there, if there is anything out there. Some people consider that reality is an illusion. It's just created. Donald Hoffman thinks that maybe consciousness really is the only field that matters upon which everything else emerges. So I think the scientific field is coming to very similar conclusions. They might be formulating it slightly differently, but it is the same principle at heart.
Fascinating. I didn't expect those answers, I must say.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's the whole point of the conference, isn't it? Is to have those different perspectives and discover. So, wow. Now, you know, how do you reconcile, though, at the end of the day, your humanistic approach and your much more technical and Bayesian approach?
I don't think they're different, because effectively the formalism I'm using is Bayesian, but there are other kinds of epistemologies that surround how I understand what constitutes evidence, or what is the ontology upon which I can build certain blocks to create knowledge. And I would say that I'm neo-materialistic, which means that to me, phenomena just emerges from interactions. And I think that's profoundly putting the human at the center of everything that matters, because all of the things that will come about from our interactions are the only things that are real.
And I believe there's nothing to reconcile, because as you said, like at the beginning, why you're doing this, why you're interested in this, is the sheer curiosity and the digging and exploring and wanting to know. And for me, it was like this feeling as a kid that I thought I know already, but I needed words to put it in. Mm-hmm. And there come people like you who can basically give me the words and the formulations and the structure to it. It's more, for me, it's more like coming from the knowing, from the guts, while you do it more from the mind. And we meet each other. There is nothing to reconcile, but to work together.
But also, I mean, that's what you said, right? It comes from experience. That's profoundly phenomenology, which is just the philosophy of experience. So a lot of people, when we want to do phenomenology, we don't even know where to start. It's difficult to explore something which is so subjective, and how to turn that into an objective practice. And so for that, you need people who have taken a long time to isolate and properly understand different parts of their minds and how they can modulate how these parts function. The way that the Bayesian approach comes in is, well, how do I couch that in different kinds of structures, and how do these structures interact to create an integrated layer that gives you information? And what does that information do? How does it modulate whether I see the cushion or you, whether I'm focusing on what you're saying? But that just gives you predictive power. You still need to be able to experience it. You still need qualia.
I want to add on that, in my words, from my perspective, Lao Tzu, we know the great sage Lao Tzu. He said there are three ways by which you gain wisdom. And let's screw the first one is like by imitating, which is the easiest. That's none of us. By reflection, that's yours. That's the noblest. And by experience, that's mine, which is the bitterest. So I took on the experience, that the suffering as an engine, and you took on the reflection, the thinking and the exploring. And we meet each other at the end of the day.
We thank you for your sacrifice.
Anytime.
So let's look now at the technology part of this. The big thing now is artificial intelligence. That's part of what we're talking about here. We'll browse together. What is, do you see LLMs as a step on the way to a great artificial general intelligence, they call it? Do you see that there are better options that are coming down the pike? And do you see those solutions ever being able to emulate consciousness? Can they compare to humans and animals? Assuming the animals have consciousness, which I think we can agree they do.
So it really depends how you define consciousness. Sometimes this word gets very loaded. I think some people mean sentience, some people mean awareness, some people mean selfhood. Not all animals have a sense of self necessarily, not that we can detect. Some do that we can detect, but that's always the problem, right? You need to detect it. And it's the same for AI. What do we use to detect a process which is fundamentally subjective and therefore to some extent hidden from everything else? I think LLMs were interesting. I think they taught us a lot about, well, how do we relate to reality and what constitutes a useful perspective on reality, what can be contained within language, and what kinds of technologies have given limits. I do think that something better is coming. It's still a generative model, but in that generative model, what you have is the notion of action and therefore causality. How does a given action lead to a certain outcome? And when you have this, you have a loop. You have an action sensory loop. That loop is the basis for what we generally understand as a conscious process. Without this loop, we're probably not going to get to something that is considered by AGI, but I tend not to think as AGI as a one thing. I tend to think of it as an ecosystem of things, which through their interaction will create integrated information. They will synthesize more than they will just regurgitate, which is generally what LLMs do. They just regurgitate.
Wow, you got to explain this to me later.
I think we could sum it up in another way of phrasing it.
No, I love like the loops and the stuff, and I'm following, but I need a little bit to digest it and let it in.
Well, how would you cast the action sensory loop? So I feel things, I process, I act in the world, and I feel again. How would you cast that?
It's in my world, in like the Buddhist or spiritual world, is the world of consciousness, perception, sense. It is a loop, which we call samsara. And the way out, again, is the way in. So when I have a reaction on something, I find it pleasant or unpleasant. Because I have a consciousness, I have sense organs. I have sense consciousness. Because I have sense organs, I see a sense object. There's contact. After contact, there's feeling. After feeling, it's either pleasant or unpleasant. In both cases, it goes back to the mind and either wants more food or it wants to avoid it. The way out is in by observing, taking a step back and going through that experience, through that feeling and transcending it and stepping out of that samsara, right? And coming back to the question, I would appreciate, why not? Why not? Steve Wozniak said, like, artificial general intelligence is only then there when this intelligence can go into a unknown house and make a cup of coffee. Find the coffee, find the water, find the coffee maker. And as a coffee passionate, I like that example.
I think there's something to add to that example, because unfortunately you can always give an example and someone will come up with a machine that can do it. The problem is they keep moving the goalposts, because the thing is, the core of that is you have not taught it how to make coffee, but it figures it out. It exists within the world, and through its embodiment within the world, through its interactions, through its errors, it will figure out how to make coffee. It will understand the structure of the world on its own. I think that's the key to AGI.
That's the experience again.
Yeah, exactly.
The experience part. And that's where the animals kick in. Why shouldn't animals like expand and evolve? Because they live with us and they're part of us. And so they also learn with us and grow with us. And we grow with something else. So yes, and yes.
I think that's how we return to the question of ecosystem, right? Because a lot of people, again, there's this fallacy that it's not to say that there isn't one world, one intelligence, etc., but they tend to think of it as one unitary thing that is separate from everything else. They really want to centralize what constitutes general intelligence, where I really do think that that's a fallacy that has been bred by our nature of individualistic patterns. But I think it will be about having systems that find meta-stable states in the world through trying to learn more about everything around them. But you can't know everything at once. You can't have every belief at once. Some of them will be contradictory. So what you need is elements that will be able to hold these beliefs while others hold these beliefs, and together they sort of create this manifold where different kinds of perspectives can exist. Like the dolphin perspective might exist in contradiction to the dolphin predator perspectives, and this will become a more efficient and useful ecosystem than one where only one perspective sort of erases everything else.
I'm glad you're saying this, because from my perspective, the only true self is non-self. So self is non-self, because everybody is made out of more non-self elements than of self elements. So there is no separation. And in meditation, you look deeply into the nature of yourself and what are you made from? You're made from minerals, your parents, the sun, and all food that you take in every day. So who are you? Basically, you are nothing. And we need to be nothing, and we need to realize this in order to evolve. If we separate us, we will die out,
So
dry out.
I was thinking about this actually in preparation for this talk, and I was trying to understand like what it might mean for, say, consciousness to be both separate and also not separate. And I was thinking about it in terms of distribution, density, probability density. And by that, I mean like every one of us exists somewhere on a plane. And you can think the plane is an illusion, but nonetheless, we exist on a plane. And that is a sort of like, there's a density, and we move around a manifold of states. We can be sitting here, I could be sitting there, you could be sitting there, and those are different states with different probabilities. And I am just this sort of drawn boundary, but this is also a drawn boundary. So this right now is just, a statistical illusion. I could look at it much, much more differently. And effectively, if you sort of push away this boundary and you keep looking further and further and further out, eventually there's really only one boundary. So I was trying to go towards what you have in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. I'm absolutely fascinated.
It is.
Yeah. I guess we're left with one more really important question, which is what does the future hold?
I think a lot of technologies will head in the same direction. And this is that we need networks, and we need the ability not to be turned into only one paperclip. And so that will mean having multiple types of agents that have the right infrastructure to talk to each other in a way that is safe, auditable, understandable, explainable, that might be through blockchain, it might be through other kinds of technologies, but effectively it's very decentralized, such that, again, we're back to ecosystems rather than a unitary perspective.
Awesome. From the technical side, from my side, it's, how would I say, it's in our hands. It's in our hands what the future holds. And from my side, it's generating presence, becoming aware of who we are, that we are nothing, and that it's a good thing to be nothing. And then we can apply all these terms and understand and apply them actually better, and free us from that notion that we control anything, but rather give it away and flow.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Allan Davidson at SystAIn3r, and I want to thank you for joining us for the conversation with Mahault Albarracin and Moensch Micha. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Allan.
Thank you.